today's call. So as many of you probably know, astrology is probably one of the first things that we are called to kind of when we start our curiosity. We could find it everywhere. But today I wanted to bring a friend and an expert to really talk to us about astrology. Her name is Charlotte Wenner. She has been fascinated by the power and complexity of the human psyche from the very young age of 15. And she began studying both psychology and astrology. Both of these disciplines, she states, have granted her countless insights into the nature and working of our inner being. Throughout her life, she has traveled to various wonderful places and countries, gaining a great deal of understanding of the universal qualities of people. Due to her daily spiritual practice and intense studies on different therapies, as well as her degrees on the astrology professional counselor, Charlotte has written articles and delivers lectures both nationally and internationally. She is currently writing her book about her particular form of groundbreaking astrology, which we will be talking about today. I am getting all tongue twisted, which she calls structural noetic astrology. Charlotte, hi, and welcome to the call.
Thanks so much, Angie. Great to be here.
Thank you. As I told you before, I mess up on words every now and then. I think I'm just so excited to get started that I'm like, okay, let me read this fast. So it's an honor to have you here today. And I really want to pick your brain as much as we can because
welcome.
Cool. Because like I said, I think everybody at some point of their lives starts getting curious about astrology, whether they believe it or not. They'll read it in the newspaper when people used to read newspapers. You know, they'll look it up online. What's my weekly horoscope? Can you tell us kind of like a basic, I guess, definition of what astrology is?
It's an interesting question, and on the one hand, it's very easy to explain, and on the other hand, it's not. I like to say a true astrological chart is a representation. It's like a photograph of the solar systems as it is circling the Earth at a particular place and a particular time of your birth. In the sense that it's based on coordinates of time and space, your horoscope actually sort of orients you to the cosmos, which is a pretty incredible thing. You can see yourself as a material embodiment of the cosmic planetary energies, if you want to see that way, but at that moment, you are an expression of that moment in all its potential and all its aspects. So that's basically what we try to do with astrology, is hone into, okay, what are the potentials that were inherent with this at this moment in time? And how does the process of time and the development of consciousness interact to further expand those potentials? I hope I answered your question.
No, completely. So obviously I believe in astrology. I've always believed in astrology. The way that I see it, and I mean, it's kind of the same thing, but I want you to clarify it for me. The way that I see it is kind of like it's a map of my personality, my character, my subconscious, like it's all this like little blueprint of this person born on this day at this time and this location, right?
Yeah, basically, but it's not only you. Everything that begins at that moment, a business, a lecture, all has that same energy, but the expressions are unique. And that's that indefinable aspect of astrology, which I think is often overlooked. And at the same time, because it is overlooked, is why there is so much criticism. Sometimes people say, yeah, if it's all in the horoscope, then that means that you have no free will. Mm-hmm. But it is the spark of consciousness that is embedded in that beginning that actually gives it life. Without life, it's only a piece of paper with ink on it.
Right.
So,
Right.
the aspect of consciousness in that sense, it's not so much different than what we see with quantum physics. I know scientific minded people will probably freak out if I start talking about this, but I see that there is a definite analogy between the aspect of consciousness determining specific outcomes in experiments at subquantum levels, and the way that the potentiality revealed in the symbols of a horoscope is, its expression is determined by the consciousness that gives it life.
No, and that's beautiful, and we can get as quantum as you want. I have no issue with that, because I want to get your opinion and your professional take on it, because again, so many different people talk about astrology. I've never really talked about astrology to depth with somebody that has like all this knowledge. So I wanted to ask you, I know there's different types of astrology out there, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Could you give us like a little rundown of what different kinds of astrology?
Sure. Now, I will focus primarily on what I would call Western astrology.
Okay.
You have, of course, Chinese astrology and Indian astrology. And I have to be quite clear, I know almost nothing about them. The subject of astrology is so complex that it's really impossible to learn too many different systems. In the West, we all operate basically from the form it was given in Hellenistic Greece, and most famously associated with Ptolemy. And but actually, he used the concepts, he adopted almost completely the concepts that were already in use in ancient Mesopotamia, and particularly within the tribe of the Chaldeans, which were actually a sort of priest class that evolved from the Sumerians, the first known civilization in the West. Now, Ptolemy and Egypt also had a very similar form as the Sumerians, ancient Egyptians. And of course, the Hellenistic philosophers and teachers, they spent times in the courts of the Egyptian pharaohs and in other areas of Mesopotamia. So it's absolutely not surprising that they would have been impressed by this knowledge of the Chaldeans and the Egyptians and adopted it to themselves. The difference is that certain cosmic truths, according to the research that I've found for my book, certain cosmic truths which were known in ancient Egypt and Sumeria and Mesopotamia to a certain degree, were either ignored or suppressed or not understood by the Greeks. They had a specific philosophical concept of how the universe was structured. And it was very much based on mathematics and geometry. And they adopted the principles of numerology and geometry. They allowed the Mesopotamian form of astrology, they fit it into their own models. And one of the greatest losses that this entailed was the aspect of a dual solar system, namely a visible and an invisible. What I term the physical and the metaphysical solar system. They concentrated on the visible planets and luminaries, that is, those that could be seen with the eye. So then you're talking about the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Jupiter and Saturn. But the outer planets, which were at least implied in older astrological texts, were ignored. And I found that actually classical astrologers, which is how the people who still practice the same astrology as the Greeks developed, they were well aware of the presence of Uranus and other outer planets, but they suppressed this knowledge because they found that these outer planets were somehow an evil influence that should not be known. I literally found this on some websites of classical astrologers. So I was really surprised about that. So that's the first basic form of astrology, which came from before the time of Jesus Christ up and through the Middle Ages and pretty much into the 20th century. Now, with the discovery of course, with the discovery of Uranus, Neptunus, and Pluto, things started getting a little bit tricky for the classical astrologers because they had based everything on their numerological science of the power of 7. Okay, you have the power of 2, the power of 5, and the law of 2, law of 5, and the law of 7. So you have the 2 luminaries, the 5 planets, and the 7 altogether. So they had that all set up really in a perfect structure. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly
they came to screw up.
Exactly. Uranus breaks through, which is absolutely the energy of Uranus, breaks through that old structure. And, they could sort of, and then comes Neptunus and then Pluto. So this is when also at the same time, what's really cool about the discovery of new objects, of real astrological factors, is that their discovery, the nature of those planets or factors also becomes dominant in society. So at the time of the discovery of Uranus, for instance, which represents breakthroughs, unexpected disruptions, new directions, the unique, the unpredictable, that was the time when we had, for instance, the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Then you come to Neptune, and you see that there's a great rise in spiritualism, for instance, with Mesmer, who introduced hypnotism. You had the Madame Blavatsky's Theosophical Society, all that hypnosis and channeling and all that stuff. And that corresponds to Neptune, which is very much the urge to lose oneself in the limitless and in the spiritual and in the cosmic and in the ideal. Sounds and then you have, and then Pluto, which is an incredibly powerful, compressed, powerful energy. You have nuclear energy and the nuclear bomb, and you have depth psychology. Okay, and Pluto is also about getting underneath the surface, and that's the Freud became popular, psychology and psychiatry became popular during those times. So these all had to be integrated with, especially with the advent of psychology, a new interpretation of astrology also became integrated. Instead of seeing it in the classical way of being able to predict events, to be able to very rigidly define people or developments or expectations, the planets became interpreted at a psychological way, especially with the rise of Carl Jung. Carl Jung was he's like a hero to modern astrology because he greatly respected it, and he also added all kinds of concepts like archetypes or the subconscious. All these things that very much resonated with the types of principles and concepts in astrology. So what you mainly see being practiced today is psychological astrology. You have
That's what it's called?
yeah.
Okay.
Some people, they call it Jungian astrology. Some people just say astrology. And if they practice Hellenistic astrology, they call themselves classical astrologers.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Question though.
yes.
So as you were speaking, I mean, I have a whole bunch of like questions and pop-ups, but right now with what you said with Carl Jung and with what we talked about at the beginning, if astrology is kind of like the mark in the sky, let's put it that way, in the cosmos of us, of who and what we became. And then Carl Jung comes at a certain point in life and defines archetypes and conscious and subconscious. Obviously, if we are a representation, just like what's the phrase? What's above is below, same as above, same as below. So just like we have a subconscious and a conscious and archetypes within our psyche, it's obvious that we are representing what's up in the cosmos, right?
Well, yes, if you're able to think beyond what you can actually see,
Right.
feel, smell, and taste in front of your nose.
Right.
but,
Okay.
but there are also those that very much are don't want to go that far. And in fact, I actually see it's the universe. I like to use the holograph analogy. Brilliant book. It's like 30 years old, The Holographic Universe.
Read it.
But yeah, but you know, it's everything just reflects each other. So even even yesterday, I was reading a post on an astrological page on Facebook, and a very respected astrologer, she says, Mercury has entered Virgo. I wonder what influence that will have on the discussions between the farmers and the government. And I'm like, influence? The planets don't influence. That's a fundamental problem, and that's why science can always attack astrology as a pseudoscience, because from a cause and effect perspective, that the planets cause a certain effect. That's the only way they say that astrology could work.
Right.
But of course, there's absolutely no way to measure that.
Right.
And that's not how it works anyway. So what your observation is absolutely right. What we are getting, but we are also giving. It's a constant feed between different expressions of consciousness.
And speaking of consciousness, I think the reason it came up is because so we give and we receive, just like cause and effect. But if we see everything in consciousness as unity, as organism, as alive, and as one, it's obvious to me that we are constantly feeding off each other, including the planets. The problem, the difference I see with spirituality and let's say, other faiths or religions or whatever it is, everybody wants to see things as separate. And I think with astrology, we tend to see the planets as separate from us because they're up there floating in the cosmos and we can't really see them. I mean, the only thing we see are sun and stars, and we know some of the stars are planets. But in reality, if we don't see it as separate from us, it actually is a part of us. I mean, it's a trippy way of saying it. I know some people might get lost in this, but technically that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. It's more like they're useful. It's useful to see things as separate because that's a mirror. The initial, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Matias Estafano, but he talks about the initial impulse of consciousness to find out, who can I become?
Mhm.
And because of that, the initial monad had to split into a duad.
Right.
So it's useful. There's absolutely no problem with duality. And it's also how we can use everything to become more conscious of everything that we are.
Right. Okay.
So,
That's
yeah,
a beautiful way to, okay, that's a beautiful way to see it. Because, and again, there's, like you said, there's nothing wrong with duality. I mean, for whatever reason, powers that be, we decided, whatever it was, we come as we are. We just have to remember who and what we are. But if we see everything as a mirror, we can definitely learn and expand and help and connect and grow, which is part of what this whole mission is. It's to ascend and grow spiritually and in so many different ways. So I think that's
yes,
beautiful.
exactly.
Let me ask
And
you.
I truly believe that the horoscope was developed exactly for that. For it's a kind of mandala, and of
Okay.
course it's a 2D representation also. And I've become fascinated while writing my book about, okay, but actually it's a 3D situation in 2D.
Mhm.
If you think of the fifth dimension that the Estafano talks about, he says, well, you have those four cardinal points,
Mhm.
and you have expression, experimentation, transformation. The third step I
Right.
forgot. But in order to understand this whole cycle, you have to take a bird's eye view. And that's when you raise that fifth point to the top, so you get this square-based pyramid sort of thing.
Okay.
And from that point, that's sort of the astrological look. You
Okay.
can use the chart in that way. So you see, okay, these things have happened. This whole process has taken part or is going to take part. And from that viewpoint, you're really able to really develop and expand your conscious understanding of all those possibilities.
That's a great way to describe it. I can totally see that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something. So speaking about your book, I know you're working on, you have structured astrology to everything that you've learned and you've studied, and you call it structural noetic astrology.
That's correct. I started out actually writing the basic concepts of what is called structural astrology here in the Netherlands.
Okay.
Structural astrology was the first introduction in the 1980s of the Black Moon, who many people know as the Black Moon Lilith.
Mhm.
But structural astrology incorporates much more than that. And I've been working on that after studying for several years with the person who developed this form of astrology. I've been teaching for the past 8 years, also been teaching it and giving supervision and intervision groups on it. And I decided, well, it's time for English speakers or international astrologers to be able to understand what's going on, because everything about it is in Dutch.
Right.
And except a few very bad books in English. But anyway, so I decided, well, I can do that. That's what I should do. I'm an English speaker and I'm fluent in Dutch and I've learned this stuff, so I'm going to do that. And I thought it was just going to be a book about structural astrology. But in the process of writing it, it's become much more than the original astrologer ever set out for it to be. And I've been very much inspired by the work of other pioneers in the noetic sciences, such as Greg Braden and Joseph Spenza, the work from Freddie Silva, from all sorts of these modern pioneers. and what they know about the ancient wisdom and what they know about the quantum wisdom, I see, yeah, astrology is that it has relationships to those things too. So just a week or two ago, with the North Node conjunct Uranus, I suddenly thought, hey, I have to give this a new name, structural noetic astrology. So I'm very excited about that.
And I love it. First of all, I love the name. Second, I love the fact that you're seeing it from a different point of view because, okay, let's go there from the noetic science point of view. And that's one of the questions I was going to ask you at the beginning. Ancient civilizations have their complete firm belief that there are what they call star brothers in the sky. Other civilizations and other planets, let's be real, the way that I see it, for me, it is impossible to believe we are the only things alive in this one beautiful planet, while there's so many other planets and galaxies and universes we probably can't even see. So for me, it's like a given. And then some of those ancient civilizations have talked about how those star brothers, whatever they want to call them, have taught them, in a way, astrology. The pyramids themselves are so perfectly aligned to the sky on this date, this date, this. I mean, there's just so many things that even engineers are like flabbergasted, as in, wow, this is perfect. And that can only be viewed from up top, if anything. Like, okay, number one. Number two, when you spoke about the structure of the universe, how it's actually composed of math and geometry. That's also something that, let's say, for example, sacred geometry, the Merkaba, like all of those different kinds of explanations, and that's the way that I see it. These are all studies and explanations to understand literally how we and the universe are made up. So going back to the classical astrology, let's say classical, the typical astrology that people see in a newspaper, the idea that we from down here, like little ants, are looking up at the sky and figuring this out isn't exactly it. There's so much more to this than we could possibly still even not know yet, because we're still finding discoveries.
Yes, but this is absolutely true, and everything that you mentioned, I incorporate in my book. These are exactly the things that I think, yeah, that I make a relationship to how these can be seen in astrology. What I have also spent quite a bit of time on in this book is about the misunderstanding concerning Black Moon Lilith.
Yes.
Because this is a very, very disturbing mistake that is being made by almost every astrologer. And it is one which I felt, which really got me started in my research. This whole idea, which you paint, this picture of us down here looking up there, is exactly the relationship with the source, with God, with whatever, that we have been conditioned to see for the past, I don't know how many thousands of years, but it is not the true one. And in the most ancient Sumerian texts, there is a lot revealed which contradicts the stories in the Old Testament. This whole thing about Lilith, for instance, for the most part, the Black Moon Lilith is associated with the story of Lilith as told by a 5th or 6th century AD, so after death, unknown writer who called his work the Alphabet of Ben Sira. And if you Google this and you look at Wikipedia, it cannot escape your attention that the most scholars consider this work to be satirical.
Mm-hmm.
It is not scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
It's a satire. And it was written to make the Jewish faith look bad. So it makes completely fun of Adam, for instance, by giving him a first wife that rejects him and is it's a and this myth comes from the later Babylonian stories about Lilith. But if you go further back, as far back as you can, you find out that Lilith is actually one of the heiresses, goddesses, that is heiress to the tablets of destiny. The oldest cultures followed matrilineal descent. And the tablets of destiny, which were the inscriptions of all the knowledge of the past and of the future, they're called the emerald tablets of Thoth in Egyptian mythology. Mm-hmm. These tablets were passed down through the goddesses and god lines through matrilineal descent as much as possible until they were usurped by the first patriarchal ruler of the gods, Enil, who became the basis for the Jewish Yahweh in the stories which Abraham gave us. So it's an incredible story, but I'm telling all of this just to say that this concept of man being anything less, of being a sinner, being flawed and made of dirt, is the second story of creation in Genesis. And in the first story of Genesis, it says, and God said, let us create them in our image.
Mm-hmm. And it was a plural God.
Also. Yeah. And he created them, and the first creation was also man and woman. So looking up to higher authorities is what people who want to be in authority here have been conditioning us with for millennia.
Right. We could probably go into another video about everything that you just said, because I absolutely know, and I know.
Well, then you wouldn't have to buy my book.
No, actually backwards, because even as we talk about it, they still need to buy the book to actually like physically learn it and read it and understand it. And I'm coming from a very truthful place. I know exactly what you're talking about because I have studied that as well. But it takes a little bit of, okay, you need to assimilate. That's what I'm saying. They're still going to have to buy the book because it's like you need to read it and assimilate, because we've been so conditioned to a certain view and a certain story. Our own mind is going to be like, wait, because I remember when I learned all of this by bits and parts, I was like, wait, what? And I'd go back, wait, what? Okay, hold on. Next part. What? It was like phrase by phrase by phrase, because it is so shocking that is something that actually makes more sense to me. But it took a bit from the old mind that I was trained in to actually be open enough and then understand it, because those are different things.
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of like okay. Number one of the purposes for this talk show is precisely to bring out this information. And number two, one of my projects that I am working on, besides a few of other projects that all deal with the same thing, is precisely to bring about this type of information. Because the more we make it aware, the less, number one, crazy it sounds, the less taboo it is, and the more people actually wake up. I don't care what you choose at the end of when you read all of this. It's up to you, but know the truth that literally has been hidden for so long. I mean, even in archaeology, I don't remember, I think it's Greg Braden that says at some point, archaeologists have made amazing discoveries, but they do not change the textbook of the same story that's been told repeatedly and repeatedly, because it does not fit the scheme of what scholarly you should be teaching. So nobody talks about it. And it's like, that's a part of our past. That's a part of the past of the earth. I mean, what is so wrong with saying, you know what, for X amount of years, we thought this was like the farthest date back, but guess what? We found this. What a cool thing. But no, I'm not going to say
Yeah,
people in
it's
control,
really
but it's
strange. Yeah.
right.
But in these Sumerian stories, you see that the apple that the so-called serpent gave was the knowledge of good and evil, and by eating that, humans became like gods. And this was the knowledge of the godlike abilities that humans have. The first of that is the ability to align what I'll call then the individual expression of consciousness with the entirety of consciousness. And the second is to create things in matter from thought. And those two processes are exactly the processes which are essential to structural noetic astrology, and which do not exist in other forms. So there's an interaction between the axes of the black moon and the opposite point, and of the black sun and its opposite point. And that forms a cross, and with a cross, you can make a lemniscate, or a figure 8, the sign of infinity. And that describes the path of coming to consciousness and embodying consciousness. The second is what I talked to you about before we started recording, and that is the cycle of creation. Now that's with as I talked about, the North Node, which almost every form of astrology incorporates as being your destiny or your mission, what you come here to do. But it just doesn't appear there, and you work very hard to get there somehow. And astrology is much more exact. There's also the point, the opposite point, Capus Draconis, that's the head of the dragon, and then you have the tail of the dragon, the Latin, which I've forgotten. And that's the talents and abilities that you bring to this life that you don't have to do anything to be able to use in achieving your mission. But there are also the squares to this axis. So it's also another type of cross, and this cross is one of the most ancient esoteric symbols, and it shows the ability to reach infinity. If you follow the points in this way, you see, or you can make a circle of it. That's another infinity symbol. So the circle in the figure 8 can only be formed by these crosses, and that's why the 4 points of the invisible luminaries, I call them, the black moon axis and black sun axis, and the lunar nodal cross, which are the 4 points related to the North Node. Those are the 2 cycles of the divine which we were created to be able to use. I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? I mean, that astrology has all of this stuff.
It's fascinating. And I absolutely love the fact that you're looking to the ancients and you're looking to all of that wisdom, because it's been right there in front of us. And again, nobody else has seen it. So first of all, I'm very happy that you're writing this book, because I can't wait to read it. Second, I am very proud, and I mean that from a very humble point of view. I'm proud that you are coming forth with this information, because it is a time of awakening. It is a time to see things that are so-called invisible, but they're there.
Well, if I might just mention a few astrological points for those possibly in the know, but even as we speak, these past couple of months are incredibly powerful seeding periods in the whole awareness cycle of the awakening cycles of humanity, because in July, on the 16th, the black moon, what we call the true black moon, so that's adjusted for the influence of gravity. Don't ask me to go any further.
Okay.
But the true black moon made a contact, what we call a conjunction. So that's when two planets are at the same place.
Okay.
With the black sun. So black moon and black sun made a conjunction, the true black moon. On the 14th of August, the same is going to happen, but then with the mean black moon.
When was it? August what?
14th.
Okay.
And this is also something that I'm looking at now that I've never read anything about. I saw that George Bode, the Dutch astrologer who made the structural astrology, he writes about these periods in which the north node, the lunar cross, nodal lunar cross, and the black luminaries all converge at certain points. And the nodes aren't involved in this, but in terms of consciousness, this is a really big seeding period. I will tell you when the last moment was when the nodes, the nodal cross, and both black luminary axes were involved. That was March 2020.
Oh, wow.
I kid you not.
Wow.
I don't know what it was like for you guys in America, but here in Holland, that's when we went into our first lockdown.
Same.
And that was also when I really started studying. I saw that at this time there were those conjunctions going on. I had not read about it from Bode. I just saw it. I also saw that Chiron, which is the asteroid which represents the archetype of the wounded healer,
Okay.
was also in that same area with the moon's nodes in aspect, also conjunct the black moons and in aspect to the black sun. So it was really fitting. I wrote also a complete article about what I thought would be happening there. But we're in an incredible time. And you know how they say that the mind if you want something, you have to visualize it first, or that first intention comes and then manifestation. Well, the same is true in what is happening here. If we want to really understand what the purpose of all of this is, we have to look at those points, those metaphysical points. What's going on down there in the development of consciousness?
Right.
And then we see, it's playing out like this.
Right.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because, like, when you said July 16th, I think July 16th is the day that worldwide is celebrated for Mary Magdalene, or the feminine energy.
Oh yeah, that could be. It was 15, 14, 15, 16.
Okay.
It doesn't move that fast.
Okay.
So
Because
any of those days around that. I know this because that's when I gave my first workshop about the essence of the black moon. So based on my research, I gave one the 16th, and I was looking at I'm giving it again this month on the 14th. I looked at the chart and oh my God. So then I looked at the chart from the 16th, and I saw, oh, the other black moon was doing it then.
right.
So you're saying you're proud that we're able to bring this information out there, and it's humbling to see that the universe is working through you.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so I believe we are right now in a time of great change. And that's why I focus all of this into the spiritual awakening and helping everybody at whatever level they're at. Yeah. Because I think we're the beginning of a really big change. So the more we can help and the more information about all of these different topics, and not just repeating over and over and over the same structured view. No, we've all grown, we've all ascended. I mean, even just scientifically, we can see more than we did before. I mean, let's keep talking, let's keep evolving, let's keep sharing, let's keep growing, because this is a part of all of us.
Yeah.
And the best that we can do is literally gain insight, like you said at the beginning, and see all these different mirrors and see all of these different aspects that can help us on our trajectory. Who doesn't want help in their trajectory? But then coming at it from a place of, okay, I can use this. It's not, this is happening to me. Like you said, it's not like the planet is forcing this on you. It's more of a, okay, this is what's happening. What can I do with this? What energy can I use with this?
Yeah. And that's hard. I understand for some people that's a really hard attitude to have when something really painful occurs. I understand that. And it sounds maybe sometimes insensitive, but it's really just about the only option if you want to get out of a victim position.
Right.
Yeah. At the very least, if something painful happens and you just live through that. I know a friend of mine had a really hard time with the passing of his father, not through the COVID or anything, some years before that. Had a really hard time with that. But in the end, through his own process of getting through that, he decided to have a complete career switch, and now he's a walking coach for the grieving process. If I can translate that. So he helps people through the grieving by going on walks with them in nature and doing counseling like that. And so it's still a painful situation, but he really, it's transformed him also.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing that we all have to look at in every situation of our lives. I remember years ago, I was having a heartbreak with a boyfriend I had at the time. Like, we had broken up and it was like devastating to both of us. And we just had to do it. And that's like a totally different story. But I remember his mom and I used to, talk. And his mom told me the phrase, "Today will rain, but remember the sun is always going to come out tomorrow." And that has always stuck with me, because through the heartbreak, through the pain, through everything that we both went through, and through the whole thing, I always kept that in the back of my mind. And even then I added, even if it rains tomorrow again, the next day the sun's going to come out, meaning at some point, the rain is going to stop. And it's just doing step by step with whatever we can to help ourselves get through it, because crap happens to all of us. But it's actually, and it's again, using astrology, using metaphysics, using meditation, using whatever it is, use whatever tool necessary to help you not just manifest a whole bunch of money or manifest the cars of your dream, but to manifest and create a life that you're actually happy in and deal with the crap that happens in your life. And I think that's one of the things that maybe a lot of people sometimes miss out. They just see this as, oh, this is a tool. No, it's a tool, but for your survival, for your happiness, for your health.
One of the things, one of my favorite authors that I grew up with as an astrologer was Stephen Arroyo. And he said that's one of the things he said, the real value of astrology is to create a framework in which things can be given meaning. So even when you're in these painful processes with astrology, you can see it doesn't change anything.
Right.
You still might have Saturn going over Venus and having heart and feeling completely alone and isolated or whatever. But you can see also, this is also developing resilience and a firmer foundation of self-love or whatever. And with relationship to what you say about dealing with that rubbish and that excrement, to put it politely, well, that's where the lotus grows, right? So only in the mud can the lotus grow and bloom. And also in structural noetic astrology, the point which is opposite the black sun is the diamond. And the diamond, I tell my clients, starts out as a piece of coal. And it's only by hammering at it and chipping at it and rubbing it and sanding it and polishing it and cutting it again and so that it begins to shine. And the more pressure,
Right.
the brighter it shines, the more. So, yeah.
No, it's beautiful. Honey, we are running out of time. I
assumed as much.
We could probably keep talking about a whole bunch of different things because everything is interrelated, but I absolutely love that conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I loved being here and I love talking about this. So, yeah, if people
Amazing.
want to know more, definitely get in touch.
Where can they get in touch? I was going to ask you.
My website, which is in Dutch, is also being translated into English, so it should be in English, the option by the time this is being aired. It's difficult, perhaps, for listeners, watchers to, but you're going to put it in the comments, right?
I'll type it down below.
Yeah.
So the best way through your website?
www.de vlinderpraktijk, which basically means the butterfly practice.
Oh.
And I chose the butterfly with a specific reason, namely that my awakening came about with a teacher who used the metaphor of the caterpillar, the butterfly that thinks he's still a caterpillar. We don't have to do anything to fly. We just have to stretch our wings.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. No, I'll definitely put it in the comments, but thank you again for your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very glad to do it. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.